Lisa Booth, senior fellow at Independent Women's Voice and a Fox News contributor. James Freeman from the Wall Street Journal editorial page, also a Fox News contributor. And Capri Cafaro, executive in residence at American University School of Public Affairs and a former Democratic leader of the Ohio State Senate. Capri, let's start with you first. The recount is underway. Right. Where does this go?
Well, look, we have seen this show again before. We all know this. And I actually was at Gore Lieberman headquarters in 2000. We were sent home in Nashville. Being told that Al Gore was going to concede. And next thing I knew, I turned on the television there at Opryland, and there was Dan Rather saying, wait a minute, and Al Gore is no longer conceding. We have to make sure that all the ballots are cast. I mean, I think that, President Trump needs to be careful with how he frames this issue of particularly fraud. In that package we just saw, we heard about, issues that occurred in 2016. I didn't hear anything specifically about 2018 itself. And one thing that I think is not being necessarily covered that I think needs to get a little bit more attention is that it's not just about the fact that Broward County in particular has had a history of issues dating back, almost 2 decades. But we're also seeing that there are some issues in regards to how the ballot is actually set up. So in a portion of Broward County and the 24th district, what we are seeing is an undervote of people totally skipping the United States Senate race because of the ballot layout. That is a fraud. That's a disaster.
Whoa. That goes to voter intent, and you can't decide that.
I agree.
You don't know if tens of thousands of people in that county went to vote strictly for the governor and did not care about the Senate
100%,
race.
but that's why we need to go through this process. You're proving my point, Bill.
James.
Yeah, I think the lesson of 2000 is Al Gore should have stuck with his first impulse, conceded on election night, and spared us all the weeks of drama that followed. But I think this is exactly why we should be concerned. It's not just the history of problems in Broward County, the fact they're not following the established legal process, but this talk about undervotes, which is getting a lot of commentary from the Nelson legal team, this idea that when someone doesn't vote for somebody, an election worker or a partisan should try to determine how they might have voted is really the path to fraud. And I think people have every reason to be skeptical here.
Well, it's not just drama. I mean, it's also taxpayer money going to waste as well, or at least in my opinion. I think Governor Rick Scott has every reason to be looking at Brenda Snipes in Broward County and to have concerns there. She's been there for almost nearly 15 years. Those 15 years, there has been a lot of trouble. She's even been criticized by the Miami Herald saying that criticizing the Broward County for sort of their inefficiencies and problems that they have faced. You also look at the fact that she has just recently been found to be in violation of state law for failing to make information available to the Rick Scott campaign. Back in May, she was found to have been illegally destroying ballots while she was facing a public records lawsuit, mind you. Back in August, a judge ruled with the Florida GOP that she was opening absentee ballots in private so that they couldn't be challenged by other people. So this is a woman with a lot of trouble, a lot of nefarious activity.
You know what I think, though? I mean,
she needs to be fired, basically.
Well, and she could have been 2 years ago and wasn't. Maybe that's a question for Rick Scott. But the law clearly states in Florida when you need to report. It's 45 minutes after the polls, 30 minutes after the polls close for how many ballots were cast, then 30 minutes after that time for
45-minute updates.
For days and days or however long it's required. But if no one follows the law and no one enforces the law, no one's afraid of anything. People are allowed to do whatever they want, and clearly that has been the pattern in Broward County.
Well, and imagine being the Rick Scott campaign, and you have 2 counties where the rest of the counties have been able to do their job and meet the deadlines that they're supposed to meet, and then all of a sudden you have tens of thousands of new ballots that suddenly appear out of nowhere. They're breaking heavily for Nelson, and you have 2 supervisors who aren't updating the public about how many ballots are left, what those ballots are, patently dishonest.
Insert Marco Rubio's tweet on this. If a red county did it, what hashtag Broward County and hashtag Palm Beach County are doing, they would march in the streets and confront Republicans about it in restaurants. But because it's happening in a blue county, they create increasingly novel and creative arguments to justify it.
I think probably Marco Rubio is right. And this is the unfortunate thing about where we are in American politics, that whatever is convenient for your side of the argument and your side of the aisle, you're going to politicize it and jump on it. And that is terrible. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, we need to have consistency in argument. We need to be just as outraged if Republican votes aren't being cast as much as Democrat votes might not be.
But you're making my point. Nobody enforces it. The law is clear in Florida. But
So whose fault is that, though? Who is not enforcing the law? Is it the Attorney General? I mean, is it the Secretary of State? I mean, who is not enforcing the law that's enabling
Quickly,
this?
James, next topic. You're right, by the way. I misspoke. It's 30 minutes after polls close, and then 45 minutes.
Updates.
Every 45 minutes, updates.
Which neither county they have both failed to do.
Yeah, hey, Scott's the duly elected governor, the Secretary of State. They have the authority. They should do their jobs and not be self-conscious about it. Our election process needs to be protected.
All right, should we set up topic 2 here? Because let's throw up the race boards. Here's what's happening in Arizona and Georgia. Kyrsten Sinema has stretched her lead over McSally in the Arizona Senate race. Stacey Abrams is still refusing to concede in the unsettled Georgia governor race. And, of course, we're looking at Florida as well. So all this continues. Here we are on Monday morning, James. Here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, it really it shouldn't be this way. You don't have in these other places the same issue you have in Florida, where in Broward specifically, this history of violating the law, which should make everyone extremely skeptical. We talk about too close to call. Well, we don't know that. The count that was on election night was not so close to call in Florida. But as far as these other places, I think people should demand a better process. We should get quick results. I don't think you necessarily have the same skepticism here as you do elsewhere. But look, we should get the answer election night. Maybe Wednesday morning if there are extreme circumstances. But this stuff should not be dragged out.
At a minimum on election night, you should know how many ballots were cast in your county.
Well, and I think
Do we even know today, 6 days later, how many votes were cast in Broward County?
I don't think we know that answer. And you look at Arizona, I mean, look, I think there's still like 200,000 ballots to be counted, so that might take a little while. Georgia, I think Stacey Abrams is just being a poor sport. She's not going to win here. I know she's filed a lawsuit. She's hoping to push the final deadline to Wednesday, but I think we might know tomorrow. She loses that lawsuit, it's over. I really think she's just being a poor sport. She's wishing for a runoff. This isn't going to happen. It's time for her to just concede and to be the bigger person.
Yeah, and
I actually think it's kind of sad.
With Stacey Abrams, I think that this is more about trying to, advance this narrative that there might be an issue of, voter suppression and things like this that are specific to the issue in Georgia. I think in regards to not knowing what ballots have been cast, we do have to remember that when you send in an absentee
But by the way,
ballot,
I'm just looking for a total number. I'm not saying who voted for whom.
Right, I get that. So the question becomes, are you able to count everything that was postmarked by Election Day? Has that been received? Because usually the laws in the individual states say that your ballot sent in by mail absentee has to be postmarked on Election Day. You might not physically have that in your hand, and I think that's an issue. And let's not forget about our military voters that are overseas.
But don't you think if they were more
Meanwhile, Sandra.
Hillary Clinton.
There's more?
Will she or won't she? Mark Penn writes this, get ready for Hillary Clinton 4.0. More than 30 years in the making, this new version of Mrs. Clinton, when she runs for president in 2020, will come full circle back to the universal health care promoting progressive firebrand of 1994. True to her name, Mrs. Clinton will fight this out until the last dog dies. She won't let a little thing like 2 stunning defeats stand in the way of her claim to the White House. By the way, the White House has responded.
Kellyanne Conway, here's the tweet. Dear God, please, yes.
Who can blame her? Well,
Running?
I don't think so. I mean, who knows? But let me say this, speaking as a Democrat here at the table, there's no, we have an uphill battle no matter what to get to 270 in 2020, as evidenced by
So you don't want her to?
Well, no, please. I've never been a huge fan of the
You read the piece from Stein and Mark Penn. Do you agree with it?
No. Just go away.
Okay.
Yeah,
Please, Hillary Clinton, let somebody else take the mantle.
I think she's running again, and I think it's completely consistent with everything we've seen since the last election. She was not trying to become a post-partisan statesman type. She was putting out increasingly partisan, harsh messages. I think what's a little weird is it's more of the deplorables. She's spent a lot of time in the last 2 years explaining what's wrong with middle America.
Right.
And
Which is why her path to 270 doesn't exist.
It's almost like she wants to rerun the same script from 2016. Very bizarre.
I really like Mark Penn, but I honestly felt like I was reading an Onion article with this because it's just so ridiculous. Hillary Clinton wrote a book, What Happened? I can tell her she is a terrible candidate, and you can't teach that. You can't change that. That is who